Happy Friday and welcome into the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. We are tracking all the action in this spring window of the transfer portal. I'm Grace Remington. Let's get this show started by taking a look at the best available names in the portal right now. Remember, the portal opened on Tuesday. It closes April 30th. Jaden Rashada, one of the top quarterbacks in the portal right now, officially entered just a couple days ago, but lots of names to get to in this show. So let's bring in the expert himself. Matt Zennett's working around the clock to bring us the latest of what's going on in this crazy portal era. And Matt, we will start right there with Jaden Rashada, the former number 44 overall prospect in the 2023 cycle. Won the starting job as a freshman over three other contenders, but was limited last year at Arizona State due to injuries. Why did it work out for him at ASU?
There were rumblings going back to the winter cycle about Jaden potentially moving on. Ultimately, Arizona State added another class of 2023 four-star, highly ranked quarterback in Sam Leavitt, who had started his career at Michigan State. Sam, from what it sounds like, had outperformed Jaden through the early part of the spring, positioning himself to potentially maybe even to the point of likely being the starter at Arizona State. We would think that maybe factored into the decision some for Jaden, to where yesterday verbalized to Kenny Dillingham and the Arizona State staff that was going to be moving on and entering the portal.
Now, he was expected to be a shoo-in for the starting quarterback job this upcoming season as Arizona State transitions to the Big 12. So just how big of a loss is this for Kenny Dillingham and the program?
Unfortunately, they do have another talented young quarterback with the aforementioned Sam Leavitt, who was highly ranked when he went to Michigan State, and then went into the portal when there was a new head coach brought in there with Jonathan Smith, and then landed out in Tempe with Kenny Dillingham. And the reviews I've gotten on Sam Leavitt through this portion of the spring have been very much positive, to the point that even before Jaden moved on, had positioned himself to where he seemed to be the clear favorite to be the starter at this point.
Now, you and Chris Hummer are reporting that Georgia could be a potential landing spot for Rashada. You have an article up right now on 247sports.com. I encourage everyone to go check that out. But Matt, what is next for this young quarterback?
Yeah, so Chris has definitely been all over this one. It's been good teaming up with him, just gathering information on just where things stand with Jaden at this point. But this is a deal where, if you look back to the winter cycle, you had a former highly ranked quarterback in Dante Moore who left UCLA, and most people probably assumed at that point that Dante would look for a situation where he could step in and be a starter immediately. In reality, the priority for Dante at that point was finding a team that positioned him best for the long term, even if that meant potentially sitting this year and not starting right away. And from the sounds of it, what it sounds like is that's something that Jaden and his camp are prioritizing now heading into this process, where the starting part of it is not priority number one for him in terms of finding the next stop. For him, wants to find a situation that positions himself best for the long term. And that's something that at this point, that there's been communication between his camp and Georgia. That's something that's been verbalized, that has led to this continuing to progress towards being a potential fit.
Let's move to a school that has made headlines for its roster rebuilding in the portal, although this time it's making headlines because of its portal exodus, and that is Colorado losing 15 players to the transfer portal in this spring window, to which Deion is saying we're making a big deal out of nothing. So what's the latest you're hearing out of Boulder?
Yeah, so first of all, the context is important with that. And if you do a deep dive into just the players that they lost, there are obviously a couple of exceptions with this, but for the most part, while the number was high, the majority of players that entered the portal were back end of the roster type players that weren't impact guys for Deion Sanders and that program out there. Again, with a couple exceptions, but they're in position now where after having that number of losses in terms of their roster and that attrition, now in a spot where it could potentially add some players maybe at some point in the near future and have a big weekend, including from a transfer standpoint coming up, where they're set to host several popular, prominent transfers this weekend, one being Dallin Hayden, the running back from Ohio State, who ran for 500-plus yards at Ohio State a couple of years ago. Dayon Hayes, a popular edge rusher from Pitt, who's also garnering interest from schools like USC, which he's set to visit. Have Elijah Herring, who led Tennessee in tackles last year. Peyton Kirkland, a class of 2023, four-star recruit from Texas, a 6'6", 350-pound offensive tackle that has some upside there. So those four are part of a group that coming in from a transfer standpoint this weekend that are definitely priorities for Deion and his staff to try to get locked up.
Yep, they have 25 commits coming in so far. All right, Matt Zenitz working around the clock to bring us the latest. Thanks so much for joining us. And for more transfer portal news and analysis, go over to 247sports.com and sign up. We got a promo for you in case you're not a member already. 50% off if you sign up today. That promo ends Monday at midnight, so you got to race over to 247sports.com, sign up right now. All right, let's figure out where some of these players in the portal are going. And Tom Loy, our National College Football recruiting analyst, has got some insights for us here. So, Tom, let's start with the highest rated player available right now. That's Kadyn Proctor, who just spent 3 months at Iowa. Now he's returning to Alabama. Big win for Kalen DeBoer. What's this mean for both sides here?
To be honest, this one feels very cut and dry, Grace. He re-entered the portal after transferring from Alabama to Iowa this offseason after Nick Saban retired. He's got a do not contact tag next to his name, which indicates that he's got a pretty good idea where he's headed. He was also recently at the Alabama spring game. I'm confident he's returning to Tuscaloosa to play his college football. So, and honestly, I see that as his best fit because it genuinely seems like that's where he wants to be, around the people he wants to be around. So I love that fit. Good for him for getting back to Alabama. At least that's what I expect.
Hey, and he got to see Caitlin Clark play, so it's a win-win. All right, let's move on to Cormani McClain. Obviously, he is the biggest talk of this portal cycle. He was supposed to be a generational talent, but essentially bad work habits are what held him back at Colorado. So what are some potential landing spots for him?
So I wrote my story at 247 Sports earlier this week that I'm watching two teams. I think South Florida and USC are the two teams that are very much in play. There's definitely going to be others, but those are just two teams that I'm keeping an eye on. I believe the best fit is with the Bulls, but don't count out the Trojans or any other potential suitor, especially in the NIL era. But with South Florida, he's got the best relationship with cornerbacks coach DeMarcus Van Dyke. When McClain was initially committed to Miami coming out of high school before he ever flipped and signed with Colorado, Van Dyke was his primary recruiter with the Hurricanes and a big part of why he was committed there. So that relationship, from what I'm told, is more like family rather than just a player-coach relationship. If South Florida goes all in, which I expect, and they push for him, I could see them absolutely getting it done. But you can also make an argument that USC is the best fit. Like I said, I'm going with South Florida on this one, but when you really look at that staff at USC, they have a great group of coaches, mentors, leaders that could absolutely get him on the straight and narrow and get things right. So we already know that USC doesn't mess around when it comes to NIL and that game. So if USC wants them, they're going to be tough to beat. I also checked on a couple other schools that people have been kicking around. You had Auburn, Alabama, South Carolina, Florida, Florida State, Miami, all schools that people discuss publicly. But as of now, I'm told they're not going to mess with McClain and they're focusing on other targets.
Okay. I thought Brandon Marcello worded it pretty appropriately. He called him one of the most intriguing prospects in the portal, not just because of his upside, but because of his risks as well. Let's move on to interior offensive lineman Jason Zandamela out of USC, the highest rated interior O-lineman in the portal, and he was the top center recruit in the country last year. Where do you see him landing?
So he arrived at USC in January. He's leaving after only a few months on campus in Los Angeles. I don't know. Most people kind of call it homesick, wanted to be back on the East Coast, back in Florida. where he's from. So I kind of, if that's going to be true, and that's, everything he's saying and everything you're hearing behind the scenes, then you're watching South Florida, Central Florida, Florida State, and Miami as the teams to beat. Personally, I'm keeping an eye on South Florida, Florida State, and Miami. I know UCF is definitely making a play at him and pushing hard. And you can make an argument that's the best fit, but I'm keeping a really, really strong eye on South Florida. We already talked about the Bulls being a great fit for Cormani McClain, and I think they could do exactly that here. So early playing time, positive interactions with the coaching staff already, positive vibes between both parties from what I've gathered. So I love the fit at South Florida, and I think he's not only just a want, but also a need. And it's not something he's going to find everywhere. So I think that would be a massive win for South Florida.
Tacario Davis, cornerback out of Arizona, kind of an interesting situation here because he entered the transfer portal during the winter window. And just reading some of the reports from our team side experts out there at Wildcat Authority, I guess he was sitting out of some spring practices, but most recently he did participate. So Tom, what are you hearing about his situation?
Yeah, so Davis has been in the transfer portal since Jed Fish left Arizona for Washington, and here we are months later, and he hasn't landed anywhere else, which is a pretty positive sign for Arizona. And that could be for good reason, because from what I'm told as of late, especially, he's been locked in with Arizona, attending every staff meeting, every practice, which is obviously a great sign. So there's a lot of optimism with the Wildcats coaching staff that I've spoken with. They expect him to stick around, and he's absolutely gotten other offers, more money, especially in this NIL era, to go elsewhere. But he's had multiple opportunities, and here he is still essentially committed to Arizona and locked in with the program. And I think that's the best fit for him. That staff loves it. The new staff absolutely loves this guy. They're making him a priority, and I feel like it's paying off. So I see the best fit is Arizona, and I think he's going to stick it out.
All right, next, let's take a look at Keandre Lambert-Smith, wide receiver out of Penn State. Right now, he's the second best available wideout in the portal, second only to Houston's Sam Brown. And Lambert was Penn State's leading receiver last year. So, Tom, where do you think he could end up?
According to Matt Zennis, you just talked with, he's got 3 visits on deck. He's going to be at Auburn. He was at Auburn on Thursday, and he's going to Texas A&M this weekend, I believe, on Saturday. And then he's tentatively planning to go to USC next week. Shout out to Zennis for being all over this one from day one, obviously with Lambert-Smith and a bunch of others in the portal. But, back to Lambert-Smith, I just see him as a guy that Auburn would be a pretty good fit. I think that he would do a great job with helping the young guys, talking about Cam Coleman, Bryce Kane. I think he would do a lot for those guys. But in terms of best fit, I actually think it's Texas A&M. And Andrew Hattersley over at our Texas A&M site reported that Troy transfer Jabri Barber suffered an injury, and he's going to be out for a couple months. So, this would be a perfect opportunity for Lambert-Smith to step right in and help a great deal. Mike Elko and those guys in College Station are going to do everything they can to get him on campus this weekend, get him to completely shut down his recruitment, pick the Aggies. They're also in play with Sam Brown, another target that they're pushing for out of Houston. So we'll see what happens there. Auburn's actually recruiting Sam Brown as well. So I think both sides would be completely okay with a split here. But like I said, A&M is going to do everything they can to get Lambert-Smith on this weekend and for him to never step foot at USC.
All right. Yeah, that'll be an exciting one to watch. Lastly, let's talk about running back Damien Martinez out of Oregon State. He's coming off All-American honors in his freshman season, all Pac-12 first team. And he's a guy who wasn't highly recruited as a prospect out of high school. His only official visit was to Oregon State, but he's getting a total do-over this time. His agent said he's heard from 50 programs. So, Tom, which of those 50 do you think he has a good chance of landing at?
That really doesn't surprise me, Grace, because Martinez is a tremendous talent. But he's obviously one of the most coveted players in the transfer portal. He's got 4 visits locked in. He was just at Arizona on Thursday, which may have continued into today on Friday. He's got Mississippi State, then Kentucky, and then he wraps things up at Miami later this month. Regarding best fit, I really like Miami over Arizona right now, but it's really, really close. I'd call it almost a toss-up. I really like both options. With Arizona, Martinez would step right in and be the best back in the room, but they also landed San Jose transfer Quali Conley, who can absolutely play. He was super productive with the Spartans. So they could either be a 2-headed monster if they chose Arizona, or it could go to Miami and be the guy. Like, it's really not even close. I know they got Mark Fletcher and they got some other backs there, but I really think Martinez would really separate himself as RB1 and really be the guy in an important year for him. So overall, if I had to choose, I'd probably give Miami the slight edge for best fit, just because no matter, like, zero question in my mind, he's going to be the guy for Miami next season.
Mm-hmm.
But again, Arizona, supposedly, and from what I've heard, they really, really impressed during this visit, and they're absolutely one to watch.
Yeah, he's so underrated too after playing on the West Coast, taking most of his snaps when the East Coast was sleeping. But Tom Lloyd, you certainly are not underrated. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next time. And for more of Tom Lloyd's work and the rest of our team, go over to 247sports.com. Our team-side experts are giving you wall-to-wall team coverage on everything you need to know about your favorite team. We have recruiting rankings, class rankings, transfer portal updates. That's all over at 247sports.com. All right, so we just talked about Damien Martinez potentially joining the Miami Hurricanes. Let's take a look at the Miami players who have entered the portal. 9 players headed into Coral Gables, but 20 are still looking for a new home. Gabby Uridia from Inside the U has the latest on what's going on in South Florida. And Gabby, are you with us? There we go. Good to see you. Let's start with Damien Martinez. I've heard they have defensive coaches trying to recruit him. That's how all in they are on this guy. So what's the latest you're hearing?
Yeah, I mean, that's the way Miami rolls. They take the recruiting stuff very seriously. So it doesn't surprise me to hear that there's other staffers that are involved. Yeah, I think Miami's in a really good spot. As Tom was mentioning, he was just at Arizona. He has those visits to Kentucky, Mississippi State. He's going to finish off at Miami. Before he actually started this slate of visits, Miami actually went in home with him, sat down in his living room, was able to kind of get some FaceTime with him before he started all of these trips. So the Hurricanes are very aggressively pursuing him. I think they have a great shot at potentially landing him. Of course, getting that last visit's always a big deal. And look, I think that Arizona is obviously a good fit, like Tom said, for obvious reasons. They got some good stuff going on there. But I think Miami, really, really needs a guy like Damien Martinez. I think he's a true difference maker. I think he's a guy that comes in and significantly, impacts the way that Miami is on offense. Cam Ward's at quarterback. They're feeling really excited about that, and they feel good about the wide receiver room. But Damien Martinez can come and give Miami some serious juice in the backfield. So, Damien Martinez is absolutely a top priority for the Hurricanes. And, Miami getting that last visit, I think, is something that's going to benefit them at the end.
Yeah, there are a lot of great pieces on this offense that can complement his skills. But what can you tell us about Miami's approach to the transfer portal? What positions might they be looking for?
Yeah, I think Miami's looking at a lot of, premium positions, not much different than anyone else. Obviously running back with Damien Martinez, I definitely think they're going to look for a difference maker at wide receiver if they can potentially find one. I think they're in the market for some cornerbacks, safeties, interior defensive linemen, defensive ends. Look, I think that this is just kind of one of those all-in type of years for Miami. They know that they have Cam Ward. They're extremely excited about what he's done. They finally have something to kind of put on tape. The spring game performance was very, very strong, threw for over 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. I think Miami feels like they can go all in, that they can make a strong push, especially with this expanded playoff that now allows 12 teams to essentially compete for a title. I think it's very important for the Hurricanes to claim one of those spots and, to put pieces around Cam Ward that can help him, elevate his game and to maximize what they have at the quarterback position. So I think Miami's going to be really aggressive. Of course, it seems like it's been a relatively light market to this point, but I think, as this window continues to kind of churn on, Miami's going to look to add big time pieces who could help Cam Ward and help solidify that defense.
Well, you mentioned Cam Ward's spring game, 19 of 24 passing. That's 79% for 324 yards, 3 touchdowns. And of course, we already knew how dynamic he was over at Washington State. So now that we have a strong performance on tape in the Canes uniform, what other players might this staff be hoping to attract to fill out that roster around him?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one to look at, I mean, we're talking about difference makers at wide receiver. Sam Brown out at Houston is a wide receiver who Shannon Dawson is extremely familiar with. He brought him in as a transfer to Houston back when he was the Cougars offensive coordinator during that 2022 season. He had sort of a breakthrough junior season, caught for over 470 yards. And then this past season at Houston went for over 800. So he's one of those wide receiver names that I would definitely keep an eye on. It looks like Cam Ward and Sam Brown were actually working out together in Texas, according to Instagram. So that's a nice little connection that maybe is already kind of starting to brew. I know Miami's really excited about Simeon Barrow, the Michigan State interior defensive lineman. Miami, and it seems like every other major program in the country is really like Simeon Barrow. Miami's also really working on Deani Hill, the Marshall cornerback. He's definitely a name to know, as Miami has a couple former Marshall staffers, both at defensive coordinator and the cornerbacks coach, who in Chevis Jackson, who coached Hill over the last 2 years. And then another guy, Tom was just talking about, Jason Zandamela. You mentioned USF as a good fit. That might be a good plug and play fit, but Miami would really like to add Zandamela and potentially make him, a future multi-year starter. Maybe not in 2024, but beyond. Miami views Jason Zandamela as a potential star along the interior line. So that's another one that the Hurricanes are definitely excited about.
Yeah, there's always hype around this program, but this year it actually feels legitimate.
Yeah.
So lots to look forward to here. Gabby Uridia, thanks so much. And for more Miami Hurricanes news and analysis, go over to InsideTheU.com. Gabby and his entire team are keeping you up with the latest, everything you need to know on the Canes at InsideTheU.com. All right, and that's going to do it for this edition of Transfer Portal Tracker. Subscribe to the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. Turn on those notifications, and then go over to 247sports.com and subscribe there too, so you never miss a beat on anything college football. I'm Grace Remington. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you back here soon.